We always ask people on the podcast what their favorite sports movie is or favorite baseball movie. And mine is Bull Durham, and that's no joke. That's not just because I'm talking to you. Mine is Bull Durham. I think it's the best baseball movie. I think it's my favorite baseball movie. One thing that I've always wondered is when you wrote it, and there's the long Crash Davis monologue about, the DH and Lee Harvey Oswald, where did that come from?
Well, I just thought the character needed a speech to attract a movie star, and I wrote that in about 30 seconds. That's the honest-to-God truth. I didn't plan it. I didn't think it. I just wrote it as fast as I could type and went on and never touched it.
So it was just
one of those.
A stream of consciousness sort of thing?
Yeah. I wanted, honestly, it to be a speech that was unpredictable so that it wasn't like throwing a sop to certain part of our society. In other words, it wasn't a liberal speech, it wasn't a conservative speech, it wasn't a redneck speech, it wasn't a progressive speech. He'd say one thing and you go, oh, and then he'd say something like, you never heard those two things back to back, so that you realize this is an interesting dude. This is his own, this guy's got a brain and it works in a way like, not these other knuckleheads around him. So that's all I was trying to do. And I had no idea it would become so popular.
I mean, I've got to think that thing, I'd like to know how many, prepared monologues that actors have to take into auditions. I'd like to know how many times people have used that.
Well, that'd be interesting. I don't know.
I've got to think a lot, right?
Yeah.
All right, how much?
Well, poor Kevin, because we were making the movie so fast, he had one take on it. So, one take next.
So that's a one-take speech?
We got no time, Kevin. We're moving. I said, okay.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
So before
sometimes you get lucky.
I'd say, yeah. I mean, it's an iconic speech. Before you even entered into filmmaking, you had a minor league career. How much of your minor league baseball career played into what we saw on the screen in Bull Durham?
Well, not so much the specifics as the general, the sense that you're way out in the middle of nowhere, and the big leagues are so far away you can't dream of it. You're just trying to keep your job and move to the next level. I went from the Appalachian League to the International League, and that's every stop along the way except the one that counted, Baltimore. But it taught me everything I know about how to be tough and survive and beat out the guy in front of me and not get beat out by the guy behind me, and up days and down days, all those life lessons that sports can teach, which have helped me in my film career enormously, because there's good times and bad times, the same thing. So I think that's the big thing I took away from sports. The camaraderie of the guys is what you miss, and in movies you don't get to do it, except once in a while you put a crew together and it's camaraderie, and then they're gone in 3 months. So I think that's a huge thing. I think the sense also Bull Durham players who really did have the talent, but the time and the place were wrong, or the timing was wrong, or their career. I mean, there are guys in AAA that could have had major big league careers, and they never really got the shot. A lot of Crash Davises out there, and there are a lot of Nuke LaLucias out there too. So there were archetypes in a way, I suppose.
Of course, everybody has theories as to who each one of those characters is based on. Were they based on anybody in particular, or were they just...
No, all characters, I think, when you're a writer, are composites of people you've known and part of your imagination. I think in the case of Nuke LaLuce, people always ask me, who's the hardest guy you ever threw against? And I batted against, Cy Young winners because we played major league teams in AAA, and I played against the great Oriole teams in spring training, and in AAA, you're batting against Jim Lonborg, and so the hardest guys the fastest pitchers I ever batted against, you've never heard of, because they threw 98 miles an hour, and one would go over the fence, and one would go at your head, and one would be on the low and away for a strike. So there were a lot of LaLucias who had these unbelievably gifted arms, but they just didn't know what to do with it.
Like a Steve Dalkowski.
Once in a while, well, Dalkowski was the inspiration only in the sense that I've written on Dalkowski.
Gotcha. A lot of people seem to point at that, yeah.
Well, what happened was Dalkowski was Steve was a very troubled guy. He's a serious alcoholic, and and Mike, Luke Lelouch is there's no gravitas at all to him. But Dalkowski was in the Oriole organization about 5 or 6 years ahead of me. So all these stops I made along the way, they weren't telling stories of Brooke Robinson and Boog Powell. All I was hearing was Dalkowski stories. I was going, who the heck is Dalkowski? And then it turned out my manager, Joe Altobelli, was the guy who in AAA, when Dalkowski finally got to AAA, it took him like 12 years, they roomed Dalkowski with Joe, who was 36, veteran. They had a cup of coffee in the big leagues. And they said, Joe, you've got to mature this kid. You've got to keep him on the straight and narrow. He's an alcoholic. And Joe said, I never even saw him in 2 years. He says he was never anywhere. I never saw him in the room. He used to show up at the ballpark drunk and throw 100 miles an hour. So the idea that a wild young kid and a veteran were the veteran was tasked to be the mentor, I thought was a great idea for a story. So in that regard, Dalkowski was an inspiration, but nothing specifically about his character.
Now, and you can punch me in the gut if this is offensive, but over the years, do you consider yourself kind of like second baseman, shortstop who had a chance to make movies, or were you always kind of a filmmaker who just happened to play in the minors?
One thing led to another. I mean, on my dream, I was never going to be a filmmaker. I was only going to be a baseball player.
Okay.
but I grew up, I think, with a family that was very encouraging in the creative world. My dad was a musician, and so perhaps I have an English lit degree, which I never found another one of those in baseball. but I loved these guys in this world, and this was all that meant anything to me. And then, after the strike of '72, the Marvin Miller strike, I quit because a lot of guys like me in AAA couldn't sit it out. It's people don't think about that, but you're making your living, and there's no spring training is canceled, and the season's canceled until halfway. I had to get a job, so I went back to school. I went to graduate school. So years later, when it evolved into becoming a writer, and then in the film world appealed to me, I thought, I don't like sports movies. I'm going to write a sports movie that I like, and so it wasn't it was one thing led to another.
Okay.
And each informed the next step in my life. I don't think I would be as good a writer or filmmaker had I not been a professional athlete, for instance, and a high school and a college athlete and all of that. So I look at it as a continuum, evolving continuum.
Thank you to our guest this week. If you'd like to learn more about me, you can find me on the Twitter at Lucifer Olsen. That's L-O-U-C as in cat, I-F-E-R-O-L-S-E-N. Sean, where can the people find you?
Thanks, Lou. As always, you can find me on Twitter at HOVG. And remember, head on over to our Facebook page, facebook.com/HolloVeryGood, and drop us a like. We'll talk to you later.
Later, boners.